Welcome back to the Healthy Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Madison Loomis, and this podcast is dedicated to helping healthcare professionals succeed on purpose. Today, we have a special guest that I am super excited about. This is somebody that I have known for about a year and a half, and I have watched him build something truly incredible. And as a PA himself, he's been able to earn at the seat at the table in leadership to advocate for the profession and has built out a Neuroscience Institute to be about 90 providers in total within the span of just a couple of years. So I'm excited to have him on the podcast today so that he can share insight on how he got to this point, what he recommends people do if they're wanting to get in leadership, and also just talk a little bit more about his approach to leadership and how he's been able to increase retention and build a truly fantastic team. Stay tuned. Super excited about this episode. I really think it's great for people that want to move into leadership. So here we go. All right. So today we have Jeff Brown, who I'm super excited to talk to because he has really grown something incredible and been able to break out from just your clinical position or surgical position and actually become a director of advanced practice with Community Neuroscience Institute that he actually started alongside Dr. Johnson. I think it was 2 years ago or just shy of that. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Great. And so today the talk track and what we're going to cover here is more so just about people that might be looking to break into the leadership side. We're going to learn from Jeff how he did it and hear about his success stories, maybe some of the challenges, the hardships, or what he would recommend for somebody that's looking for something similar or who wants to grow as a PA in the field of medicine. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So first and foremost, my biggest question to you is you were born and raised in Pennsylvania. You went to school there to get your PA degree, and somehow you ended up in Fresno, California. So explain that to us.
Yeah, it was pure luck or chance, I guess, however you want to say it. So I'd never heard of Fresno, California. I had never visited the state of California even. The first time I came to California was when I actually flew out for the interview for the job that I currently still have. And then the second time that I had ever visited California was when I flew out here to move here. So really what brought me out here was the job, which even back then was very exciting and something that I was very, very interested in. But now is, we're in a whole different level compared to where we were, 12 years ago now.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And so that's my next question is, you started there as a new grad in a specialty that is, I guess, not the sexiest, I guess. Like people shy away from it because it's hard, it's challenging, and a lot of people don't have exposure to it when they're going through clinic rotations. So being in neurosurgery, why did you choose that specialty and why did you even choose to become a PA?
Yeah, the PA question is kind of weird. I used to always joke that I was only ever good at science and math. Like I have no other, I'm not good at art or, a bunch of the other kind of other specialties. So for me, medicine was kind of what I always wanted to do. I was introduced to a PA when I was actually kind of studying for the MCAT. And decided that, for a number of different reasons, many of which were financial, that PA was actually the route that I wanted to go towards instead of, physician. And then, through PA school, we have a lot of students that rotate through us, a lot of new grads. And I think that the one thing that you learn when you're in PA school is you often learn what you don't want to do much sooner than you learn what you actually do want to do in terms of subspecialty. And so I was lucky that I did have I had a surgery rotation like everybody else, but I did have, a week or two in that surgery rotation where I spent some time with an actual neurosurgeon.
Okay.
So I had a little bit of that experience. But I always knew I wanted to do surgery. And to me, just my own personal opinion was like neurosurgery is like the coolest surgery, right?
Yeah.
The things that you get to do are unheard of. Very few people in the world will ever get to see or experience or do some of the things that you get to experience on a daily basis. And so for me, that was just a huge draw.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you talk to the people that want surgical specialties, a lot of times, you get the answers of, I wanted a hands-on role, I wanted to be in the OR. But when you talk about neurosurgery, you talk about cardiovascular surgery, I mean, it's intense. And I think a lot of people shy away from it. I don't think they would even let me 10 feet from the OR to do any of that stuff. So it's always interesting to hear from people what drew them to that. Like, was it by chance or was it because they really had a knack for that and knew that's what they wanted?
That's awesome. It was kind of coincidence and almost by chance that my first job is something I truly loved. One of the benefits of being a PA or an NP is you can kind of bounce around a little bit. But for me, I was lucky to have fallen into something, that I really, really enjoyed. Now, 11, 12 years into it, I still very much enjoy what it is. So.
Yeah. And I definitely want to touch upon that later too, because it's not often that you come across somebody that has not only stayed in the same specialty, but stayed with the same hospital in the same place.
Yeah, it's rare.
It's very, very rare. So I want to talk about kind of the mindset around that and also just how you did it, because I think you probably had some tough conversations, but that yielded really great results for your, career. So you were a PA though before being a PA was cool, right? So
you talk a long time ago.
The financial benefits is obviously that you don't have to go through as much schooling, even though it is still a ridiculous amount of student loan debt. But I'd love to hear kind of, okay, so now you're a neurosurgery PA, you're working with CHP before you created the Community Neurosciences Institute for a while. How did you break off and decide to open what you have open now and build and grow an incredible Neuroscience Institute? I mean, how did you get to that point?
Yeah, like years. And I can't even take credit for even really the smallest portion of this. Without getting into too much of the craziness, the community hospital, Fresno, the region, we serve almost a 2 to 3 million amount of patients, right? There's a huge patient volume in that area. With really no neuroscience center at all. There were some sporadic kind of neurosurgeons and neurologists. But I think the main driver of all of this was Dr. Johnson. I joke that I have a lot of bosses. He's my super boss. So Dr. Johnson is, our director of all of the neuro department. And this was really his vision. I've really been lucky to help, join in at that and to help grow the PA and NP component of that. So certainly we needed the hospital support, we needed the community support. And then, as we start to bring in more and more providers, we went from a group of honestly maybe 20 or 30 providers to close to 90 within about, a year and a half, 2 years. And we continue to experience growth that's only limited by, the hospital, and how much we can possibly expand. So, it was a lot of work. I think that now is a really interesting time. Now is a really good time that you start to see kind of the fruits of the labor is that, it took a year, to build all the relationships and to set the groundwork and to say like, look, we're going to get to this point to convince, the people that need to convince that we need this and this is what we're going to do. Now we're starting to see some of the benefits and some of the, rewards of all of that kind of hard work in the beginning. So we're finally starting to get some of that. So it's great to finally get to see a lot of the changes that we've made taking and having an effect.
Definitely. Yeah. And I've been able to see that firsthand too. So I think that's incredible. And I guess what made you want to take that track? Was it something where you were tapped on the shoulder because you had been with Dr. Johnson and you were a trusted PA that he knew could, work alongside him and making this all happen? Or how did you get to that point? Just, I guess, mentally and also, just the whole thing. I want to kind of unravel all of it.
It's funny. I joke that it was almost by attrition in the beginning where there was a lot of turnover years and years ago. And so suddenly I found myself that I went from a new grad to the senior provider on the team after a couple of years. And so, a lot of those things that the senior team member, kind of gets thrown into, I had to do. So writing the schedule, dealing with some personnel issues. But, there was never a formal role. We went through a weird kind of transition period where they started to explore what that would look like. And actually one of the we did have a provider that came in that served in somewhat of a director role before we moved over to CHP. So there was some experimentation of what that looks like. What do they do? What value do they bring? And certainly when Dr. Johnson formally started the program, the Neuroscience Institute, he kind of, I had a lot of personal and professional experience with him. He's had
Right.
seen what I had done, kind of hung in there through the good times and the bad, through community. And, I think
Yes.
that, to his credit, I think that he was able to kind of see that, I had some of that drive. I wanted to do some of this, and he saw that there
Mhm.
was a need, which I think a lot of hospitals and institutions are starting to see. The biggest challenge for me was having to kind of prove that you needed or earned kind of a seat at that table. And I know you
Yeah.
hinted at that, but that's where I think that things like, MBAs and MHAs and higher certifications or degrees really give you, a bit of a heads up so that, that way you're not just sitting at a table with everybody else who has a master's of business administration and they're talking, even for you to know the language and to be able to
Right.
understand all of that, it's huge.
Mhm.
And CNI, we pride ourselves that every one of our directors is, obviously an MD, DO, PA, but also has an MBA. So
Wow. Okay.
all of our providers that are in charge of our individual departments all have an MBA. So when we come to the hospital, we come and sit at a table or a negotiating table. We understand what they want, how they view it, and and how to give that to them in a way that makes sense for them and makes sense for ultimately us as well.
Definitely. And I think that's also so important too, because I think for a long while, and when I worked in a hospital, it was a lot of the directors and the people making the decisions were not clinical. They had never been in front of a patient before. And so,
Yep.
how do you make decisions that advocate and that are best for your providers to increase your retention and to feel like you have a team of valued, people that are going to stick around through the hard times and the good times without having that competitive edge to say, hey, I understand what we need to do because I've been there and I see the challenges. And I
Yeah.
think that is so key in how you guys are running things there too.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit, and it's certainly we're not the first institute to do that. We're the
Hmm.
first in our hospital system, but certainly there are plenty of other programs in the country that did do that, and they've shown the
Right.
benefit of doing all of that. And it's a personal benefit for us, and it's certainly we think it's a benefit for the hospital as well to have people that have both the administrative and directorial type of
Hmm.
background and experience and role, and at the same time they're clinicians, so they understand that you can't just come into a meeting and make a decision, that there are a lot of things that kind of go into what that is from a clinical side as well. So I think it's a huge,
Right.
it's a huge benefit that we have.
Yeah. To have that voice at the table is
Yeah.
big. Awesome. And touching back, I mean, you have your MBA, correct?
Yes.
So would you advocate, because there's so many options now, and maybe that wasn't the case when you were obtaining it, but recently I've read a little bit about the doctorate of medical sciences, which doesn't change your scope of practice, but obviously allows you to learn more and maybe, be offered that seat at the table, seen level to level with the other people that are making those decisions. But what route would you advise somebody that is maybe listening to this and saying, I want to be in your position X amount of years from now?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I did and that everybody has to do is, what are your goals with that degree? So a
Sure.
lot of the doctorate programs, the DNPs, we have a number of DNPs that I work
Hmm.
with. The doctorate of medical science, there's the doctorate of PA. There's so many different degrees, and then there's all the other additional kind of master's levels that don't necessarily have to do exactly with your original PA or NP degree.
Hmm.
So and even there's a subtle difference between an MHA, Masters of Healthcare Administration, and an
Yeah.
MBA of Healthcare Administration. So for me, I have this desire. I actually want to start a business, and I have some ideas, and I'm working on things like that. So
Yeah.
I wanted the general business degree with kind of a side of a healthcare administration. So my MBA was
Hmm.
a general business degree that then had some criteria involved that was specifically to hospital administration. So I think that if you're interested in teaching or getting involved in academics and research and studying, those are what a lot
Hmm.
of the doctorate programs are. Because again, as a PA and NP, you can't introduce yourself as a doctor. It's the same as if you
Yeah.
have a PhD. You're not a medical doctor. So
Hmm.
they certainly have their role, and they are valuable in a number of different ways. When you look at hospital administration and
Hmm.
leadership and directorial roles, I think that, in my opinion, MBAs and MHAs start to give you a little bit more of what you need to have a seat at that table and to use the
Yeah.
what you learned to be helpful in that situation.
Yeah. To have that edge. And I think, there's a lot of benefit. I'm somebody that I think in medicine, obviously you want somebody to have your credentials and degrees,
Yeah.
In any other industry, I think it's kind of like, okay, do they have the skill sets? Do they have the experience? And so I think there's a lot of conversation that goes on with which degree is best and what's actually going to be applicable within medicine if you want to move into leadership. And like you said, I think in medicine, your credentials and your ability to say, I have this and this, it does earn you that seat at the table. It doesn't make you good at that thing, but it allows you to have the voice. And I think that is what is key, because I think a lot of people go back and forth on, should I spend the more money because I'm already, $100,000 in debt? But I think it can definitely be worth it.
Yeah, it's an individual choice. Absolutely. It's an individual choice for everybody involved. You can get good return on investment for it. I think you have to look at all of that. But one of the most important lessons that I had learned was that, you're going to be in a room, you're going to be in meetings with people that have higher titles than you, that are quote unquote more important to you, but that does not mean that they have better ideas than you do. So that's an interesting way of looking at that. But I sit in those meetings all the time, and you get some of that imposter syndrome. I haven't been in a position of leadership for, decades. So I'm comfortable in my PA role, but I'm learning and growing in this kind of PA administration role where, you're sitting with, chief administrative officers and chief executive officers in the hospital, presidents of the hospitals and stuff. And so, it's great. It's a huge learning opportunity. I think in general, that's a huge culture shift for PAs and NPs who classically did not have a seat, at the table, like that kind of cliche term, but, having physician, decisions and direction for PAs and NPs isn't always the right thing. It's sort of the same thing as, directors with no clinical experience making clinical changes. Well, people with clinical experience, it's very different, making changes for, providers that have very different type of, situations, and it is tough. So, having that ability to be at that table and to represent the team and our group of APPs is just, I love doing that. It's great.
Yeah. And I would also argue that they need somebody like you in that room, because you're seeing it from a different perspective. And because you haven't been a healthcare executive leader for 15 years, your approach and your ideas, like you're saying, are going to be different. But that doesn't make them any less than important. If anything, it makes it to where they should listen, because you're the one that's seeing firsthand when a PA is coming up to you and saying, these are the problems, right? Yeah. And they might not be comfortable doing that going to a C-level executive at the hospital. So
correct. Absolutely. Yeah. And I like being that voice. I want people to be able to come to me, right? I want our advanced practice providers to come to me and to be comfortable in that. Because I wouldn't expect them to go to, the heads of our department in another situation, which is how it was years ago, right? And that's how it classically is. And that can be intimidating. In a lot of jobs, you have to go and sit with, your main boss and ask for a raise or something like that, or ask, why didn't this happen? And so I think that, having somebody that represents you at the table, that, knows what you do, has done what you've done for many years, I think that's a huge benefit here.
Yeah, it is. So what was the biggest difference when you made that shift?
The change in thinking between hospital administration and like clinicians. And so, it's a very different type of thing, right? It's the directors and how sometimes the pace of that and how things have to go through so many different people, as opposed to when you're, in a PA or NP role, it's usually just you and the physician, and you make a decision that has to be made, and that decision gets started right then. And then, you see what happens. And that's just not, I would love for that to be how that happens. And it's not, and I think people are starting to see that as some of the administration stuff becomes more visible, and you start to see how hospitals, operate. It's a business, it's a gigantic business that has, hundreds and thousands of employees, and every decision affects so many different things. And so, I think that it trying to understand that it's not just you and one other person that's making a decision for one person. It's, you as a team trying to make a decision for a group, which is then, in part of the hospital. So there's just so many avenues and so many different things that have to go through, and kind of, hoops, quote unquote, to jump through. But again, I think that healthcare and medicine and everything in general is becoming more streamlined. It has to, right? It just has to. So I think that there are still some good things that are, on the horizon as you start to work through all of this.
Yeah. And I would imagine it can be challenging at times too, because it's like you've got to play the middleman almost between the administrative side and the clinician side. So in one hand, you're having to advocate, but then the other hand, you're having to probably deliver news that they don't want to hear, or,
Correct.
things that they want done and they're not done. And so you're having to kind of be that bad guy and what's the phrase? Like the bearer of bad news,
Yeah.
to say, okay, X, Y, and Z is happening or it's not. And so I think that would be a challenge for many people who haven't had to be in that position of, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
communicating all that
it's a
stuff.
tremendous challenge because
Yeah.
I've always had the kind of personality of being friendly and open, and I want people to
Hmm.
like me or whatever for all that, and to have to deliver news, especially when it's not what I think the outcome should be too, right? Is that
Right.
I have to walk in there, and you have to, like, the most important thing to me are the PAs and MPs that I work with and work
Hmm.
together with, and so but I have to kind of shut out everything else, and when we don't get what we want or we think that we deserve, that's hard to bring that back. And
Yeah.
it's nothing that they did. It's very infrequently something I did. It's the hospital, right? And you don't
Hmm.
have any control over that. We didn't
Right.
have really any control over that when we moved into the new system, right? We're important. We're valuable members of the team. We help that hospital function very well, and we'll continue to do so. But at the end of the day, we're 40 out of 8,000 employees type of things. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get, everybody is the most important person to themselves, and
Right.
we function like that, and that's what I want to present everything like that. But it's a big hospital, it's a big system, so we continue to work together and try and get everything that we want done accomplished.
Yeah. I also think though that is the best of both worlds, because it's like you have the resources and the larger hospital system to where you've, grown your career and been able to see how sticking it out has been beneficial and allowed you to move into leadership. But then you also can create kind of this smaller community that feels like it's a private practice and
Yeah,
feels like it is operating independently, even though it's, yes and no, you know what I mean? But I think there's
yeah,
a lot of new grads and people that shy away or 100% want the hospital or 100% want private practice. And what you have is really a good mix of both.
yeah. And I think it's one of the selling points, is it's really hard to impress that upon people to come and interview with us, through a Zoom call where it's just me and you talking. But when
Right.
they come out and they see the team and they see the interaction of the team and they see the interaction of us with our attending physicians,
Right.
that's what kept me here. Is
Hmm.
the people that I work with, the other PAs and NPs, and then certainly the MDs and DOs. You could very much like the job that you work, but if you don't like the people that you work with, you won't stay. And you
No.
see a lot of that kind of rotating through PAs and NPs. There's a number of different reasons for that. But certainly, not enjoying who you work with is extremely difficult. It's a hard
Yeah.
job. It's a busy level one trauma center. We're the only level one trauma center for hundreds of miles. So you
Right.
have to enjoy what you do. You have to see that you're providing value to people that are in need, and you have to be able
Hmm.
to lean on your team and really appreciate and enjoy working with each other. And that's not super common nowadays. You see people
No,
that
it's
might
not.
like what they do, but they don't necessarily like who they work with. And so for us,
Yeah.
we get together on times that we're off, and I think that speaks a lot to we can spend 100 hours a week with each other, and then on our week off, still want to get together and hang out. That we're not so tired of each other that we just never
Yeah.
want to see them
That is
again for
incredible.
7 days. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, I'm sure there's some people that you're like, I could do without them, but I
yeah,
can honestly attest to that. And in working with you, Jeff, that when I follow up with candidates that have interviewed with you or have gone on site, that's the first thing that they mention is that
yeah,
the team is awesome and that everybody just seems kind and like people they would want to work with and not grow
yeah,
tired of. And I think that
yeah,
is the most important. You look at somebody like yourself and your journey and your career and that you didn't leave because of that. And because of that, you've now been tapped on the shoulder to start something that I guarantee you as a new grad, you were never thinking that was going to be your track,
yeah,
right? Or that
yeah,
that's what
for
you were going to
sure.
do.
Never, yeah, would not have anticipated being at this point. Yeah, not even
Right.
close. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you've gotten there a lot quicker than most because of your ability to kind of just stick through it. And I think that's building a huge culture around what you're doing. And I think that's why you're so successful in what you do.
Yeah, that's what when Dr. Johnson and I met, and we tried to fix, for lack of a better word, any of the turnover that we had. We couldn't change the fact that it's neuro. It's tough. It's intimidating. It's hard.
Yes.
We can't change the hospital. We're seeing 150,000 ER patients a year type of thing. We're probably top 15 busiest trauma centers in the country. We're the usually 1, 2, or 3 busiest ER in the state of California. Wow. We can't change that. But what we can do is we can try and make it so that we're staffed appropriately, that you have all the resources that you need, and that you enjoy the people that are around you, and that you work in a mutually beneficial way with your attendings, that they appreciate our feedback, and that together we come up with a plan. And so I enjoy hearing that, because we can continue to improve that. There are things in the hospital and things in specialties you can't change, but things like culture and things like actually enjoying your personal and professional life, that's what we can work on. And that's what I think most jobs should be focusing on, because you can actually control those things.
100%. And I mean, it's not about picking a specialty or picking a specific job. It's about picking the right people who are going to advocate for you and who you're going to enjoy going to work for, because it's not an easy job, right? It's really not. And there's a lot of burnout. And so you better like what you're doing and who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So in doing so, I mean, I guess tips for people that maybe are in this role and struggling to find balance, or people that are worried about that aspect of going into leadership. How do you find that healthy balance between, like, this is my identity and my work, but also I am this, and this?
Yeah, I'm probably the worst person for this question, because I you're in a similar situation. We're a bit of workaholics. And so I've always been like that. I always am just in like perpetual motion. I just feel like I should be doing something. I can't really sit and watch like Netflix for hours on end.
No.
So, if you have that kind of drive, after a few years in clinical practice, you start to get into a rhythm. Things start to become a little bit more, easy and straightforward. And then I was always looking for something, kind of the next thing to challenge myself. So for me, that was the MBA. And then now it's kind of this whole new leadership thing, which has kind of opened up like just an infinite number of challenges in every direction to work on. So
to put it shortly.
So, but again, I really, really like what I do. And so if I'm sitting at home and I'm relaxed, I'm not doing anything, I'm just kind of sitting, then I don't mind working on stuff at work, right? Or for work. To me, that's still, it sounds crazy, but that's still kind of relaxing. Like, I'm not at work doing, neurosurgery things. So that's still not the same type of thing. And then, I think that really, for you to build something, and for something that you really enjoy and really want to take off and be very, very good, it requires a lot of work. And much of that work is not going to be compensated. And so, I think that's a hard thing that people don't either want to hear and don't want to think is true. I have a friend of mine who's in the opinion of like, I have all of these ideas, but I'm not going to do any of them until you pay me to do them. And that's one way of doing it. But the other way of doing it, in the way that I did, which is I did all of those things and then said a year later, look at all the stuff that I've done. I think you should pay me for this. And it worked out. Now, that doesn't mean that you just been like, no. And then I did all of those things. But that money for me was just kind of an aside. I did those things because I thought that it would help improve the service. But I realized it's tough, because that's not how a lot of people are, especially in today's society. Is you want to get paid for everything that you do, and I get it, right? Money is a huge driver, but there, in any business, there's just not infinite money. So if you want to be looked at differently, you have to do different than what everybody else is doing. And if everybody else is doing, quote unquote, just the job, then to set yourself apart, you have to do other things, and you're not going to get paid to do those other things initially. I think that if you do them well, in a system like ours, or in a system like others, hopefully that they would recognize that and then compensate you, because they realize that your talents are best used in different ways. But 100%. I think you have to do that work to be able to then say that you should be able to only do that work.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like, and I don't want to use the word entitlement, because it's really just a mindset difference between that of an entrepreneur and someone that sees the risk to reward, and somebody who can say, okay, I might not be collecting a paycheck, but the idea that I have, if I don't quit, it's going to reap its rewards at some point. Like you said, like you're finally seeing things come to fruition that you had envisioned years ago. And it's not an overnight thing. And it's not something that happens within a week or within your first hire or anything like that. It takes time and it takes consistent efforts where you might feel like everything's just beating you down into the ground. And then one positive thing's happen and you're like, okay, like that gives me enough hope and enough faith to keep going with it.
Absolutely. That happens quite frequently, is that you take a lot of losses for a while and it starts to weigh on you. But then you get one of those victories and it does kind of wipe out a lot of that. And you're like, look, I was able to make this difference, right? As it took, all of this and all these lessons and every single one of those, quote unquote failures or whatever you want to say, the things that didn't work out the way you wanted to was still a lesson. And then you take all of that and you just kind of continue to move forward and continue to do what you want to do, to build what you think should be built.
Yeah. And I think you can't stray from it either. And I think that's what makes a good leader, is not feeling like you have to pivot from what you think or what you believe to be the right way of doing it to fall in line with maybe what is the easiest route or the route that's going to get the quickest yes. Or, you really have to be able to stand true to what you envisioned and say, no, I know this is what's going to change, right? And you've seen it firsthand in your leadership with building out. You said, retention wasn't the greatest when you first started, which is why you were able to rise up quickly. And that's not to take away from your clinical aptitude or anything. I mean, I'm sure you're wonderful, but it's to say that you stuck with it and you knew that you had this vision, and then you get the right people around you, and then you can get into the positions that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So what's been, just really quick, the best part of leadership and making that move, and the worst?
So I was trying to think of a way to answer this. There's two, right? Because the regular like clinical side of it is that, in surgery and in things like neurosurgery, is that you really can make a difference. Like it's, we do procedures and we obviously help the surgeons operate. We take care of patients pre-op, intra-op, post-op. They can truly save lives, right? And so I very much enjoy doing that and seeing the benefit of doing all of that and to really being able to make a difference. And then from, the leadership part of it, for me, it's being able to represent and lead this group of providers. So, some of which, I did neuro ICU for a little bit when we first developed that program a couple of years ago. It just wasn't my forte. I just liked neurosurgery better. And so I've watched people with less experience than me just blow past me in terms of level of competency and knowledge. And, I'm extremely happy and just, excited to be able to represent them. Like I think our providers are phenomenal. What we do on our service is, incredibly unique, with no residents, no fellows. It's the PAs and NPs running a unit with, attending physicians. And so that's very unique. I just love being able to watch our providers now, especially in this kind of role where I get to kind of take a step back and be a little bit away from clinical from time to time and watching from an admin role and watching these providers that we took a year out of school. A year ago, they were sitting in a classroom and now, putting in art lines, central lines, taking care of patients, having, difficult discussions with families and performing extremely well. That's awesome. I love being able to watch that. Sure. And then, the counterpoint is all of the same thing, just the opposite. So clinical, it's giving, end of life discussions with families and everything. I mean, neurosurgery, neuro ICU is brutal. Literally every single day you have to tell somebody that, that they're going to die or that they're going to have. So, I mean, that never gets easier. They don't teach you how to do that in school because there is no way to learn that.
Yeah.
And then from the administration stuff, it's having to deliver, bad news or not getting what we want or in my opinion, if I set out to get something, I want to get that, right? And I feel it as a loss, or I feel it as something that I wasn't able to do if we don't get that. And it often, it's not, me. I might have gone into that meeting not knowing the 6 other things that are happening from the other side of that table that prevented me from getting it. But the end result is that, I didn't get it. And then I have to take that information back to the providers that I know are functioning, extremely well and doing wonderful work. And we just didn't get what we had asked for. And that's tough because there's nothing they did that they don't get it. It's just the hospital for any number of reasons can't give it. And so I hate that, right? That sucks. But it's something that we all, have to deal with. And giving bad news is something I'm still trying to, learn and improve
easy.
upon. It's never going to get easier.
If somebody enjoys that, I'm just kind of like, red flag,
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
It's never easy having awkward and difficult conversations. And like you said, nobody prepares her for it medically either. I mean, I couldn't imagine. But I think that's just empathy, right? That goes back to why people decide to become PAs is being the person that can be by their side during those difficult times and maybe provide a solution or at least provide the empathy in a way to make the end of life and that care be the best as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes a long way.
Awesome. Cool. Well, medicine aside, I do want to talk about something because obviously I get to know you a little bit more personally than just being a PA. So tell us about the book that you just wrote.
Yeah. Sometime when I have 10 minutes of free time, I've always wanted to write a book. It's just been something I've always wanted to do. I don't feel like I'm an amazing writer by any stretch. And I'm a huge horror movie nerd. So I love scary movies. We were out, my wife and I were doing kind of a mini, vacation. And we were doing a bit of a kind of national park tour. And so I started thinking about you look at all of these RVs that are out there. You're you don't know what any of those people are doing in those RVs because nobody bats an eye if there's just an RV parked in the middle of the desert. Nobody would go and check on that. So I wrote a book. It's about 4 people that got kidnapped, and there's the kind of what happens.
In a camper? Oh no.
Yeah. And so it kind of goes on. I won't give it away too much.
Don't give away the ending.
A couple of the PAs and NPs that I work with had read it. And then, there's one of the neuro ICU doctors that is also, wanting to write a book. And he's another big horror movie guy. And so I sent it to him as well. So a bit of a side passion project for myself.
But that's incredible. I mean, with everything that you do and knowing how many hours you put in each week to your job to also do that, I mean,
it was a giant pain.
Yeah. But hopefully, I mean, if it's a hobby of yours and it's something that you always wanted to do, then I think that's great. And we'll be linking that to Amazon where you can purchase this book. Now, I'm the kind of person that hides behind the couch or goes like this even when I see blood getting drawn. So I am not somebody that can watch horror movies, but I think I might be able to read it if it's not too gory.
You'll have to let me know. You'll have to let me know. Yeah.
But definitely if you're into that, you should order it or not and support Jeff because I think that's great. Awesome. Cool. Well, it was fun talking. Hopefully we'll have you back on to talk about other topics because I know we've got plenty of things we can discuss. But thank you so much for offering your insight and helping people that might be looking to get into leadership. And
absolutely.
We'll talk to you soon about something else.
That was a pleasure.
Of course. Thanks so much.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Healthy Careers Podcast. I hope that this episode helps you if you're looking to move into a leadership role now or in the future, and maybe put some things in your mind as to what you can do to get there. We will have more healthcare leaders, practitioners, and clinicians on this podcast moving forward, so stay tuned because we do release episodes bi-weekly. Hope you have a great rest of your day and stay tuned.